People who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it fucking takes to be the best at what they do.
This is Dave Tate, again with another edition of Table Talk. Today my guests are my imaginary friend and my pretend friend. So we should have a good time going through your questions. This will be another Q&A Table Talk where we're going to start off going directly to the YouTube questions and kind of work our way from there. So what do we got?
Okay. Give me just a minute here, Dave.
Yep. I ran out of purple monsters, man.
Oh, yeah?
Yep, we got to go with the green. It's the second choice. Far second choice.
It'd be like my ninth choice there.
Yeah.
What about the white ones?
They make me shit for some reason.
Okay. Just about ready here, Dave. Okay. My knees always cave in while squatting, even while I try to be mindful in it and push them out. Did you ever have this problem? And if so, how did you counteract this?
If I had that problem, I didn't know I did. A couple things can be associated with this is you may want to bring your stance in a little bit if it's chronic, and no matter what you do. A little bit of, if your knee caves in just a little bit, it's really not going to be that big of a deal. I still don't like it personally. I'd rather have all the, because it's, to me, it's a cue. It's a visual cue that the force isn't being pushed, that outward, throughout the knees. So, but a little bit, isn't going to be that big of a deal. So first thing is you can try to move the stance in a little bit. What I typically do, if I see somebody that's having that problem, is I'll have them begin box squatting, and I'll take them up to a box that's I'll take them up to a high box to where that doesn't happen, and then work on sitting back onto the box, pausing, and then standing back up and developing that pattern over a period of time. And then when it looks solid, it could be that training session, or it could be, weeks, I will pull a half inch out or an inch out of the box until we get down to parallel. For some, this, like I said, for some, this can happen in one training session. For others, it may take 6 weeks or something like that. You can verbally cue this to death, and it's usually not going to work. You can cue knees out all you want, but it's typically, from what I've seen, it's not gonna do anything. You got to figure out a different cue or figure out what's really causing it. If it's what they're doing with their feet, a lot of times you can tell them spread the floor, turn your feet, whatever. There's a million different cues for your feet, and then that will solve that problem and kind of go from there. But the other thing is you got to strengthen the hamstrings, and you have to strengthen the adductors. So that's part of the whole process as well, is you got to be able to get stronger to be able to hold that position. But move the stance in first, kind of see how that goes, and from there try going on a higher box and then working it down while increasing the strength of your hamstrings. Movements such as glute ham raise, reverse hyper, anything that's going to work from origin and insertion. So it could be RDLs, it could be pull throughs, it could be stiff legs, any of those type of movements, trying to build up the strength on those to be able to help. And then think of what you're doing with your feet as far as grounding them into the ground and how that's having an impact, and kind of film it, be aware of it, and kind of go from there.
Okay. This one came from the live stream here. It said, how did you come up with the Tate press? So if you want to explain what that is to those that don't know.
That wasn't even me. That was some other Tate from the best I know. It just, I don't know where it really, Louis showed it to us in the gym. And so I can't take credit for that. That's what he said it was. And it wasn't something that I certainly made up, but I will say this to kind of curtail off of it. You can try to do this on an incline, and to me, nothing works as good as using a glute ham raise and leaning back against that so your sternum is high and your chest is up, and that becomes the shelf, is kind of leaning back on the glute ham raise to be able to do these from. Nothing compares to that. Second to that would be a flat bench, and then an incline bench. But the standing and leaning back on a glute ham raise it's the shit for those. And keep the dumbbells together the entire time. Don't let them separate at the top. So you keep the dumbbell heads together and press out through. So it's an extension and a press. It's kind of like a hybrid of both of those.
Okay. Next one from the live stream here. What methods can I use to self-identify weaknesses in a particular lift?
Where do you miss? I can go for forever on this. If you're missing in the bottom, if you're missing a midpoint, if you're missing at the top, and then once you figure that out, where's the technical problem? It's most of the time, and I still see this today, even though I harp on it over and over and over and over. Most of the time, it's a technical issue. No matter what the weak point is, it's a technical breakdown. That if you fix the technical breakdown, it's not the weak point goes away, the sticking point goes away, or a mini max, or whatever you want to call that. So any sticking point can be either physical, mental, or technical. Everybody wants to go to the physical answer. What exercise do I need to do if I'm falling forward on the squat coming out of the hole? Or what exercise do I need to do if I'm falling forward on the squat and I'm 3/4 up? What exercise do I need to do if my knees are caving in? What exercise do I need to do? Da 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 da. It's always what exercise. It's never, hey, just look at your technique and then compare that to other people who are ranked in the top 20 or 30 and see what the differences are. And then when you can see what the differences are, you can look at yours compared to theirs and say, oh shit, look at that, and then fix that. So spend time working on the technique. That's going to be the cue, because once your technique is close to dead on, it's never going to be dead on. It's never going to be perfect. But once your technique is 80%, 70, 80%, kind of in that range. And then obviously the heavier you go, weight will break technique. So that's where max effort stuff comes in, is a valuable tool for assessing weak points. Is it's going to showcase where the breakdown is, because you're working up to maximal weights using special exercises every single week. So over a period of time, you're going to see here's where a muscular weakness is, and go about fixing that muscular weakness based upon, hell, in today's age, just Google search it. Our website's full of different exercises and programs and fixes for muscular weak points based upon where the technique is breaking down. So if I knew an exact technical breakdown and I knew the technique was good, I could be able to tell you what to do. For example, if it's a squat, you're breaking down about 3/4 of the way up and the bar's pitching you forward. So you're starting to round forward, kind of like you're starting to do a good morning after you're starting to get midway up. But the technique is all good. Everything's solid. It's just a breakdown. It's just a muscular breakdown. That's where it's upper middle back. So things like max effort work with a safety squat bar or the SS yoke bar would be extremely beneficial. Other things such as, the isometric strength or the static strength of being able to hold the position of the shoulder blades tight and the back packed and tight is another way, where it could just be, taking a band, pulling the shoulder blades together, flexing the lats and holding the position for 15, 20, 30 seconds. Something that exceeds the time of what your average rep or set is going to be, and kind of go from addressing the muscular weak point from different perspectives, because it's not always 100% absolute strength perspective. A lot of times it's just the perspective of not being able to hold the contraction long enough to finish the rep. Another one could be that it's injured and it's not working the way that it really should work. And then you got to kind of look and see what's compensating. And I go a little bit different route because I'm working with people that actually have meets that are coming up. I don't have time while somebody's prepping for a meet to fix a firing pattern or whatever you want to call it. They got to get ready for the meet. So it's strengthening the compensation pattern to make sure they're strong at the meet, then, dealing with whatever the issue is after the meet. So that's what you kind of call training through or training around specific things instead of trying to fix something 4 or 5 weeks out, which pretty much isn't going to happen.
Okay. If you only had $100 max to buy one thing off of the site, assuming that's elitefts.com, what would it be? And thanks for everything, Dave.
Probably mini bands. And I know that's way under the spend limit that was given, but they can be used. If you have too many bands, they can be used for benching. They can be used for band pull parts. They can be, used for stretching. They can be used for loaded stretching. They can be used for so many different things. That's probably the most versatile piece of training equipment that anybody can have because it can be used for so many different things, including attaching them to a machine to change the loading of the machine, how much, because a lot of machines aren't built correctly. So you can put that on there so it becomes harder where it should, so attaching it to the machines, then distraction, putting it around your wrist, hooking it up to a power rack and letting it pull your shoulder and kind of moving while it's stretched to be able to get fluid blood into the joint. So there's that would be my answer to that because it can be used for thousands of things.
Okay. Dave, my back get hyperextended when I try to keep my back flat in the deadlift. What should I do?
Your back gets hyperextended when you try to keep it flat in the deadlift. I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but I'm going to answer what I think it is. When people send me their deadlift videos to review, I see the same thing all the time, and that is when the deadlift begins to become hard, the majority of people want to arch it to lock out. So basically, good morning, the lockout. This could be at knee level, it could be mid-knee, it could be halfway up the quads, hell, it could be halfway up the shin. When you get to that point to where, and I see it in the video, and it's different for everybody, but you can kind of see where people begin to stick, where things start to go to pieces. Right at that position is typically, if it's at the knee or a little or above, let's put it that way. If it's at the knee or above, when that displacement starts to happen where they look like they're arching it up, what they need to be doing is flexing their ass and pushing their ass to the bar and using their hips to finish the lift, not their lower back to arch the bar up. And again, if you just look at lifters that are ranked in the top 30, top 20, that hell, you can look at your own weight class as you want. I really don't care because most lifters, regardless of, body weight and leverages, are essentially doing pretty close to the same thing. And just compare your technique to their technique, and you're going to see that there's a difference. And then you want to see what the difference is and start looking really, really close. And yes, if they are built like what you are, that's going to be better. It's going to be easier to see what those are. But I still think you should look at lifters with different leverages and limbs and so forth, just as practice to be able to diagnose and see what's going on so you can better see it in yourself, because that's going to be the best way for you to be able to see what's going on with your technique, is to look at your own videos. And I swear, man, sometimes I wonder if people even look at their own videos before they put them on Instagram. It's like, what the fuck? Why would you post that? But they do. And if they're looking for help, that's great. I mean, they can put that out there, but sometimes it's such a train wreck that, I don't know why they're putting it out there, then become defensive if somebody actually offers some suggestion on what they should do. But if you just look at your technique, compare it to lifters at the top of the game, you're going to see the differences, and then just try to replicate what you see.
Okay. Dave, I saw on the Elite FTS Instagram story that you were asking about certifications. Is this going to happen, and what will it entail, and is there an anticipated start date?
Okay. There's an Instagram question that's over there, Josh, where I did a poll on my Instagram story.
Let me look for it right now.
The other day. It's the one that I wrote down, the different poll questions, because I may as well address all these at one time. Yeah. Here, let me have that. Okay. What I did is, while I'm planning for next year, I'm sending surveys out through different media to customers, non-customers, and so forth. And questions are being asked, and they're different based upon different populations. And I'll keep asking them throughout the rest of the year, just to kind of see what we want to do more strategically in 2020. Where the ones that I put up on my Instagram story, then I made as a feed post, where what I did is I took the things that, and maybe the word despise might be a little bit too strong, I took the things that I absolutely despise about the industry and asked a poll question of, should Elite FTS do these in 2020? And those involved, should we do certifications? Should we do online training? Should we have exclusive content or a paywall? Should we have supplements? Should we host a meet? And then wait for the response rate. And so the response rates are what I posted, and they were interesting. So I guess the reason why I ask the things is, I think that it's important, if you're somebody that runs a business or you run a company, you have to, you're going to always have a bias, towards what you want to do and what the company's values and vision and all that is. So you're always going to have that bias, but you still have to have a good pulse on what's going on in the industry. And you need to know what the industry wants from you, what they want from you as a company. So I'm going to touch on each one of these things, and I'm not saying that we're going to do any of them, because we may not, but I'll tell you why I asked, or why I despise them, and kind of leave it at that. How they could be fixed, I don't know. That's one of the reasons why I asked that, because with each one of these things, there's most people in the industry are going to agree with me that every one of these things are broken. They're fucked up and broken and taking advantage of people that are in the industry. So the one that you just asked about was a certification, right?
Yeah.
And how that would work. So here's the deal with certifications that I don't think people really understand is, yes, there's primary certifications that exist. The CSCCA, the CSCS, so certifications through those type of bodies, that require a degree and, so forth. Those are kind of at a different level. Those are what I would actually call certifications. All the other things that you see that aren't those, So to me, a real certification is something that you have to have CECs or continuing education units to be able to maintain. You should have, in my opinion, a degree in the field, or some formal education in the field. And to me, that's what a certification is. Everything else that's titled certification, it's just bullshit. If you want me to be completely frank and honest about it, it's bullshit. All it is, it's a seminar. So what's happened over the period of the last decade is to make a seminar look better, they just tag on certification at the end of it and charge twice as much money. So an example would be for 8 years, maybe more, maybe less, I'm not too sure. We used to run a seminar called the Learn to Train seminar. And when we first started doing that seminar, it was close to $500 and it would sell out. And then all the profit from the seminar would be donated to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And this was doing very well. And then over a period of years, it just kind of fizzled out because other people are doing the same type of thing, so they think, for a fraction of the price. So we got ourselves into a position to where we can't do seminars like that anymore. We can't do the summits anymore because we can't charge what we need to charge to even break even, let alone be able to donate any proceeds or any money to charity, which is typically what I've always done with any seminar that we've ever had, is with the exception of one, all the profits have gone to charity. And when I speak someplace, I always ask the host to not pay me and donate it to charity. It's just kind of how I've always felt. But now if I was to take that Learn to Train seminar and say next year, do the same thing that we've been doing. So 7, 8 different stations, 4 coaches per station, 1 head coach, teach the lifts, the squat, bench, and the deadlift on day 2. Then on day 1, teach programming so you know how to actually build a program. Put that all out there and call it the Learn to Train certification. And instead of charging, what we can't charge now, which is $249, was the last rate I think that we put out and fell short by 30%. But charged $800 for it and then gave everybody a little fucking piece of paper that says you're certified in the Learn to Train, it'd probably sell out. So that's the reality of the certifications, and that's what I hate about it and despise about it, because every other day there's a new fucking certification that's all it is. It's just a fucking seminar that they throw certification on to justify charging, a much higher rate than what it really needs. I mean, what are you going to, from these different seminars that you get this piece of paper from, what the fuck is it even worth? Are you going to put it on your resume and that's going to make a difference to an employer? It makes no difference. So the certification question would be, if we were to go that route, then how can we disrupt the market with everybody that's doing that, which is a fuck lot of people who are doing that, to be able to say, okay, this is, a legit certification that you're not going to get at the end of the day. You have to do this and then 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 have so many hours and da-da-da-da. So it's a more complicated process to be able to do that, to disrupt the market. But I wouldn't do a certification just to throw on the name of a seminar to be able to sell the seminar out. I'd rather do the seminar for absolutely nothing and make it invitation only to those people that have supported us over the years than to have to use a certification to be able to sell something that's basically just a seminar material. The next one is the online training. That's, everybody knows that's fucking broken. It's from a powerlifting perspective, it's broken to the point that lifters today that are coming into the sport think that they need a coach to do a meet, which is 100% pure bullshit. So what's happening is online coaches are popping up, new ones are popping up, left and right. all over the place. And I'm not saying they're all bad, you know, most are, because what they're doing is they're snagging these beginners and then charging them X amount per month or per training cycle. And the beginners are going to make gains no matter what they fucking do. So the trainer is going to look like they know what they're doing because they're just coaching somebody through beginner gains using some program that they probably, you know, downloaded or hacked off somebody's article or ebook in the first place. And then using that to, you know, guide the person through a training program to be able to get to the meet. And that's same thing with intermediate. So a large percentage of the people who compete in the sport are going and feel like they have to have an online trainer to be able to compete. So what happens on the back end of that is we have the highest attrition rate that we've probably ever had in the sport of powerlifting. So we'll have somebody that will do a meet and they'll never do another one again. Because to them, part of doing the meet is the cost of paying the person to help them with the training program, which is fucked up because if you're really helping somebody with training, you need to help them year round, not just the 10, 12, or 14 weeks before a meet. It's got to be a year-round process because the real gains are made in the off-season. They're not made when you're trying to peak and train for a competition. But because of that, what we end up with are, you know, it's hurting the retention rate of the sport. So the people that used to last 10 years, 5 years, they're in and out within a year because of this. And it's simply because it's an easy money grab to be able to go in there and to grab and to take advantage of the younger lifters. And so I can rant about that on and on. Everybody knows what I'm talking about because we all see it. You know, we all see the impact that it has and we see how it's changed the industry. So in one regard, it's changed the industry because people can now make money doing what they love doing. You know, the ones that, but it's also hurt it because the ones who are really good at what they do, this stuff takes time. It takes a lot of time. And now they have to compete with the market rate of people who are just, you know, that don't give a shit, that are just throwing programs out to be able to suck and drain the beginner gains. So from that standpoint, you know, if it was something that we were to look into doing, it would be some type of system or some type of process to where we would teach people how to train themselves. Because we live in a day and age which is frustrating as hell because people don't want to learn how to fish. They just want you to give them the goddamn fish, you know, where it needs to go back to kind of learning how to fish and learning how to train so you can make your own programs, because at the end of the day, that's when you're going to make the greatest gains. If you stay with it over a period of time, you're going to start to hit sticking points. You're going to need your own auto regulation and your own self-awareness and self-analysis to be able to get yourself through a training session and through a training cycle to be able to make progress. There's no way any coach can do that that's not with you in person. You know, that's the only way that I can see that being of value. But if they're with you and training with you in person and you're an advanced lifter, then it's more communication than it is do this, do this, do this, do this. You know, it's a lot of pivoting that has to go on in there. So it's getting people back to the basics of learning, that they need to learn how to take the time to learn the process and how to build programs and to train themselves, than just fully expecting somebody to tell them what to do, because that will only work for so long. And from that standpoint, we have 1 million pages of education. We have a whole program design section of articles on our site that basically walks anybody through any style of training program that they want to use. And then there's the powerlifting section as well. So we already have the education materials out there, but I don't see anybody out there that's offering any type of online training program that actually takes the time to show people how to train themselves. So that's where I think there's, you know, a void in the market. And if we were to do it, that's what we would do. I'm not saying that we would, because why, you know, that people have to want it. And right now I don't see that being something that people want, you know, because if they do, then there's education materials to be able to do that. In today's market, they want to just be told what to do. So from that standpoint, if that's what the service is going to be, is just telling people what to do, then I'm not going to have any part of it, because that's not educating anybody. And we're in the business of educating people, not telling them what to do. The other one was supplements. I'm not going to have anything to do with supplements. I just put that out there because it drives me crazy as well, because that's another industry where, let's say you did want to put a product out for whatever reason it is. By the time you actually source quality ingredients and got the pricing and all that down, you're going to find out that you can't sell your product. You can't buy your product with the quality that should be in there for what most people are selling it for. So that should kind of tell you what's going on with that entire industry. Again, all this is, there's outliers to all these things. So most of the industry. So I don't want to spend the money or the time on anything like that. So that was just a question I put out there just to fall in line with some of the other ones. The exclusive content, having a paywall, that seems to be, it kind of comes and goes in the industry. And this one got it's a higher percentage of people did not want us to do that than wanted us to do that, which is understandable because we've put out more free content than most paywalls, most pay sites put out. That's not even a fair comparison. You'd have to combine many different pay sites to be able to equal the content that we're giving out for free. But the one area that as a business owner that is of concern is the education that we provide is still part of a customer service package. It's kind of how we look at it, is it is advertising and it is customer service. And from that standpoint, we're providing the same degree of customer service to those people who support us financially, through their purchases, as we do those people who never will and never have supported us financially. So it's, in a way, it's a little bit of a disservice to the people that do support us financially. But I don't think the answer to that is having a paywall. I do think having some type of, content over and above what we currently have, that's out there now, that's just exclusive for the people that do support our company, that would be the direction that we would go. But from that standpoint, we need, more sales to be able to have more of content staff to be able to do such a thing in the first place. So it's kind of a counterbalance type of thing. So from that standpoint, it wouldn't be taking the content that we have, stopping all of it and saying, here, you got to pay X amount per month. It's something that I would never do. I'd rather go out of business than have to do that. So that's completely against the value systems of Elite FTS. The powerlifting meet was the one that everybody wants us to do that. And the reason for that's pretty clear. If we were to decide that would be something that we would get into, it would be unsanctioned, for one thing. Because I just don't want to deal with the pissing politics that come with a federation. Because as soon as a company, runs a meet under X federation, then every federation that's not X federation, all their lifters hate your company because you just supported X federation. So it's kind of a no-win situation no matter how you look at it. Plus, I don't want to deal with any of the federation's politics. If it was something that we were to do, it would be for the lifters exclusively. They would be the most important aspect of the whole thing, and they would be taken care of. Where today, it's the norm to have a meet in a gym somewhere where they're charging $100+ entry fee, and then when you're there, the equipment doesn't match. Sometimes the bars aren't even the same. It's in a gym where the temperature control is terrible, so it's either hot as fuck or cold as hell. It's just a money grab. the proponents, the meet directors will say, it's all about the lifters for lifters and all this other statements and quotes and crap that they say, which is just, it's just words, because their actions don't support that. You go to a meet and they don't have a drinking fountain or even water in the fucking warm-up room, then they don't care about the lifters at all. Typically you'll see nothing in the warm-up room that's there to take care of the lifters, and very, very rarely are you going to see equipment that even matches. It's because they don't give a shit. They don't want to invest back into the meet, to be able to make it better. So over a period of time, if it's the same meet director and they're pulling in $4,000 per meet that they put on, over 5 or 6 meets, they should have stellar equipment that matches warm-up room and lifting platform, but yet we never see that happen, because they're more concerned with, making money off the lifters than they are taking care of the lifters. And I have nothing against making money off of the sport, but you got to have your ducks in a row, before you do so. So from that standpoint, that's where the frustration I have with the sport is. It's not my biggest frustration with the sport, but it's one of my frustrations, because we've gone from, meets that where meet directors really had a hell of a time breaking even, to be honest with you, because I was running meets back then, and just to break even was a good day. And it sucked when you didn't break even, because that was money coming out of your pocket entirely. And today, $100 plus to be able to lift in somebody's gym, where you don't even get a freaking t-shirt, and the awards are regurgitated or used leftover rewards from meets prior. So there's a problem there, I think, as well. So all these things I put out there have their problems, and typically in business, when you can provide a solution to a problem, then that's good for the business. These are just problems that I don't know if I want to get involved in providing the solution for. But I also believe I shouldn't bitch or complain about them unless I'm willing to do something about them. So where we go from here, that's to be seen.
Go ahead. We'll just kind of whip through these live stream ones here, Dave. Can the shoulder saver pad be used for the floor press as well as the bench?
Yeah, the only thing might be if your elbows hit the floor.
Probably wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah, before the pad hits your chest. But yeah, definitely. I use it for everything because my shoulder's messed up. So I'll use it for, close grip incline presses, floor presses. I use it for everything. On the floor, I actually don't have to, because it depends how fat and how big my arms are, I guess. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Okay. Did your float tank experience improve visualization, and were your sessions coached?
Going way back to when I went through that, yeah, it did. It helped me to silence my brain a little bit more. And there was some coaching, but it was typically before and after, and it was more just dialogue of letting me know when thoughts come into my head, just acknowledge them and let them go. Because if somebody's new to meditating as well, that you can't get frustrated because you're distracted, because that happens to everybody. That's kind of what meditation is just acknowledging distractions. So, and the more that you acknowledge it, you let it go, you acknowledge it, you let it go, you acknowledge, let it go, then that's the state that you kind of want to be in. So the float tank helped that, because the sensory deprivation that's actually what it was called back then. Wasn't so much float tank, but sensory deprivation tanks is what it was actually called. So it kind of takes a lot of that stimulus out. So you're just stuck, and you have to deal with what's there. So did it help that was a question, did it help the visualization? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, it did. I think from the very beginning, once I got used to the floating, which that was the first part, is just getting used to the floating. So there wasn't any visualization or any of the other stuff in there. It's just kind of getting used to that, because it kind of freaks you out a little bit. It takes a couple times before you can actually get in there and relax. You know, from that standpoint, I do think it expedited the process of me being able to visualize a little more vividly and clearly than had I not used it.
Okay. Should an average dude who loves to bench apply the same technique as a powerlifter like Dave teaches in the So You Think You Can Bench series? The goal is to get stronger, build muscle, look good naked, and be healthy.
I want to think before I actually answer the question, because the first answer is, don't bench, so let me kind of explain why. If you're going to bench and you're not training for the power lifts, then you want to be able to bench the safest way possible. And that would be the way that it's demonstrated in the videos, or the way most of the demonstration videos that I've seen on YouTube for the bench press have been pretty solid. It's very rare that you're going to see something that's wrong, or very extremely wrong. I mean, there might be a couple things that I would disagree with, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they were wrong. So if you're going to bench press, then I do believe it is a technical exercise. Far more technical than, say, a tricep press down or something like that. So if you're going to bench, then bench with proper form and technique, and take time learning how to do that. And if you're not a power lifter, leave your ego out. And that's the reason why from the very beginning I said don't bench. Because if you're not a power lifter and you're just training for aesthetics or for health or for whatever other reasons, there's a lot of other exercises that you can do to work the same muscle groups and to accomplish the same goals. That isn't going to be an ego pull, which is going to want you, or try to get you wondering how you compare to other people and all this other crap that is associated with training, but really shouldn't be, because that should simply be associated with competing, not associating with the actual training process. So, and I think that when you start to deal with ego issues on how much you can lift in the gym, then you start to walk a really fine line for the recreational lifter of the ability for them to do too much and get hurt. And it's not just the bench press that would fall as one of the exercises that I'm talking about. It depends how long you're lifting and what your goals, objectives, and basically your training age and how your technique is. But if it's a true beginner, when I was training people that were Gen Pop, true beginners, I pretty much avoided the bench press, I avoided the deadlift, I avoided bent over barbell row. There's a lot of things that I avoided just because they didn't have the core strength yet. They didn't have the ability to stay tight, or brace as we call it today. They didn't have all these abilities that needed to be trained. The core has to be trained before the limbs, so it's just part of the training process. So that has to kind of fall in its own rank and order before it comes out there. And I didn't want to throw them out there because I didn't want the bench, especially. It's shifting a little bit today, which is good, because people are more concerned about, it's not everywhere do you go now do people ask you how much do you bench, where that used to kind of be the case. Now they're asking about other lifts too, which is kind of cool, it's creating a environment to where people have to be more well-rounded, developed, I guess. I'm trying to figure out what to call that, but they have to be, they have to train more movement planes than just, a bench press and a sagittal plane. And, so that's a good thing from that standpoint, but it still exists.
Okay. And then there's a part 2 to that question. Is it necessary that the knees always have to be lower than the hips, regardless how long the femurs are? I have long legs and arms, and I also have problems that my elbows stay over the shoulder pad.
It sounds like you're tall. so you got very long limbs. So no, for you, no, because what's the reason why you want the knees lower than the hips is because you don't want your ass to come off the bench, so you get red lighted. But you have to be able to keep your body in a tight position. So if you're very tall and you have very long limbs, then sometimes throwing a mat over top of the bench, like a yoga mat, or a thicker 1-inch mat, because yoga mats are very thin. So a few yoga mats, so forth, to be able to bring the bench up a little bit higher, it would help you. It would help you more than just letting your ass come up, because then you're going to create lower back strain. So you still want to be able to have that surface and keep your body tight. But I wouldn't worry about it. I would just find, first off, and you may not have control of this, there still are benches out there that are only 15 inches off of the floor as far as the bench pad, which is super low. So if you're a tall person, you're already dealing with a big disadvantage from that standpoint, because longer limb people still have issues with a competition height bench, which I believe is 17 and a half. So that's the answer. Just throw a mat on there.
Okay. Have you seen the new Army combat fitness test and the Navy? And the way he worded it doesn't quite make sense, even looking for functional strength training. So what is your opinion on the training of those is the main point of the question.
I haven't seen it, so I can't. I don't have an opinion. And if I did see it, I'm not too sure I would want to give my opinion, because a lot of times when you're dealing with a strength and conditioning program, you have to know all variables involved in the program and what the intent of the program is. So, for example, if we take Division I football program, which they're notorious for putting training videos out a couple times a year, where they're like training montages of the team training, and most strength coaches that are not working in a university or school setting will find a million things about these videos to just tear them apart, about technical flaws, just stupid crap with no spotters. And there's numerous things that I used to do the same thing. I used to go through those things and just be like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy is actually a strength coach of a program like this. This shit is horrible. And working with coaches over the last couple decades, I've seen the same things, over and over again, where, I'm coming in as somebody that, thinks that technique is the number one most important thing, because I work with powerlifters. And if the technical breakdown begins to happen and you're working with an advanced, very, very strong lifter, that technical breakdown is either going to be a missed lift or they're going to get hurt. So that's where, my bias towards technique is very, very high. So of course I'm going to look at programs that don't have that bias towards technique being extremely high and think this is crap, until I started to understand many years ago, that the strength and conditioning part of the weight room part is just one part of a huge sphere to be able to get the athletes ready for what they do best, which is play football. So that then you need to look and see, what is the weight room really being used for? Because anything that they do lifting weights is going to be able to make them stronger. Bad form, good form. I mean, we've seen that applied even through professional bodybuilding with accessory training and so forth. So we've seen, horrible technique get people freaking jacked and huge, and we've seen great technique get people jacked and huge. So there can be an argument made for both parts. But what is the actual purpose of the D1 football player training in the weight room? Number one purpose. All right. The number one purpose is for them to be able to train and to develop and work cohesively as a unit, and to care more about their team members than they do themselves. So whatever they can do in the weight room to be able to build that bond and to make that bond stronger, it's going to be a better team. So put this way, if you were to have, two teams, of equal skill level, and one team was 100 pounds stronger across the board on every core lift, but didn't like each other, didn't get along, and didn't know how to pull it together as a unit and work together as a unit, versus another team that is 100 pounds less strong on all the core lifts, but is amazing at working together as one, is a cohesive unit, who's going to win on the field? The answer to that is simple. So you can't go and start picking apart a program based upon what you see on paper or what you see in a 1-minute video clip without knowing what the context of the actual training program is, or even that section of the training program is, without knowing I think you get what I'm saying. You got to know what the overall goal is. So it's easy to sit back and to, program quarterback or whatever you want to call it and say, this is wrong, and this is wrong, just to be able to make yourself feel smarter. But put in the same position, are you going to be able to produce the same type of athlete and same type of player on the field is what they can? Because if you can't, then you need to shut the fuck up because you don't understand what you're talking about. The same way I wouldn't expect those coaches to be able to step out and begin training, advanced level powerlifters to be able to break all-time world records.
Okay. How would one approach banded deadlifts without any deadlift platforms or band hooks?
Dumbbells. So, there's a couple of different ways to do this. You
could stand on them?
Well, no, you just hook the bands. You loop the bands around dumbbells. So if it's hex dumbbells, they're not going to roll. So you just have 4 dumbbells, and you pull them the same way you would a platform, such as it's going to be hex dumbbells out in front. And you got to make sure the dumbbells are heavy enough that it's not going to pull the weight up. There's also a way that you can slip knot a band through the plate, so you can do that and use plates. So there's creative ways to be able to go about doing this. Another way to do it is you can use the short bands and hook them, loop them on the bar, before you load the bar. And then when you walk up, you stand on the band and kind of go that route. I've also seen ways to where people will, double loop a mini band or triple loop or however they need to do that around a barbell in the middle and then step on each end, so that holds it down, and then be able to deadlift that way. So you can always stand on the bands, I guess is what I'm saying. That would probably be the easiest way. The dumbbells and all the other stuff, you can end up building towers, but it still can be done.
Okay. Hey, Dave, I'm 21 and suffer acid reflux. I'm struggling to put on any weight. Any tips?
Tums. Ask your doctor, man, because I know where you're coming from with that. It can be a bitch because all you're doing is, burping all day long. So it's going to impact your appetite. So speak to your doctor, and, there could be, first off, you want to make sure that there's not bigger issues that are causing this than just indigestion because of the food that you're eating or the type of food that you're eating or the amount of food that you're eating. So you want to kind of get the bigger issues out of the way. And then from that standpoint, there's over-the-counter meds and prescribed meds that can be able to help with that as well.
Can you talk about HIIT training?
Yeah. What do you want to know?
Start with the basics and then.
Well, HIIT, there's a lot about HIIT training. So it used to be a huge debate topic, years ago, and it's not so much anymore. But it's basically, to sum it all up, one set to failure, some warm up sets. So you can say HIIT training, you can say it's the way Dorian Yates trained, you can say it's the way Mike Mentzer trained, it goes Edgar Goddardin. I mean, you can keep, going back into the history. So there's a lot of stuff. It's pretty easy to find information about it. So I'm not going to get into the details of it, but there's a lot of ways to implement it. A lot of people will say that dog crap training is kind of a form of HIIT training, but it kind of is and it's not, so it's kind of like conjugate training. There's a million forms of conjugate training, and then there's West Side training, which is, one form of conjugate training, but there's a lot of ways to go about skinning a cat. But what from a strength and conditioning perspective of if that's what you're solely to use to be able to make powerlifters stronger, I'm not a big fan of it, even though Ken Leisner used it pretty much exclusively and was able to produce, very good powerlifters. I don't think it's enough volume and enough technical reps to be able to do that. But from a accessory standpoint, bodybuilding standpoint, I think low volume, high intensity training definitely has its place because it's going to create less wear and tear because there's going to be less repetitions per training session. So wear and tear is based upon load to a degree, but it's also based upon the number of repetitions that you're doing over a period of time. So there's less wear and tear on the joints, but there's probably more wear and tear, on the tendons and muscles because you're training to and past failure, which there's modified ways to use HIIT training to where you may not train beyond failure every single time or every single set. There's ways to periodize how that goes in there, which you'll be able to find if you can go out there and research about it. But before I came to Westside, I used HIIT training predominantly or exclusively pretty much the whole off season of powerlifting. So I would do a meet, take a few weeks off, and then come back and use a HIIT style of training without doing a squat, bench, or a deadlift, and you just use that for whatever time period that I needed, whatever gap was laid out before I had to start training for the next meet. And I think that served me well at the time because it was less wear and tear. It put muscle on, for me at the time, better than anything that was more volume did. But I think it's a good system that people shouldn't discount. At the same time, I don't think it's a system that people should exclusively rely on. So if you're a recreational lifter or bodybuilder, or you're not training for, say, strongman powerlifting or weightlifting, then you can throw in, bouts and periods of mesocycles or macrocycles of high volume work, and then throw in the same period of time of low volume, high intensity work or HIIT training work. And then that's going to kind of keep different stimulus floating through the program to be able to advance you perhaps a little quicker than you would if you just stayed doing the same thing all the time.
Okay. For someone who can only commit to 2 training sessions per week, what are your thoughts on max effort and upper and lower for 3 weeks, then dynamic on week 4? And then they preface, not a competitive lifter.
I don't like the only way that I would like that is if you have a very strong history of conjugate training and dynamic work, because from what I've found, if you develop the dynamic strength or the explosive strength, it takes a few weeks before you start to see a decrease in bar speed. If you're watching the bar speed of somebody's submaximal lifts, it's going to take a few weeks before I call it a pop, before you begin to see somebody lose that pop that they're going to have coming out of the bottom. So in that regard, throwing in dynamic work, every 3rd week is a way to maintain it, so it doesn't go away. Because if somebody is a very explosive type lifter, then you take that away, then it's gonna hurt bad. If they're not a very explosive type lifter, then it's probably not gonna make any difference at all. So where being able to train twice a week, I would just have, if you want to use max effort and dynamic day, I would just have a max effort day and a dynamic day during that week and do the main lifts, after each other. So you'll have a max effort upper body, max effort lower body on the same day. Make sure you have adequate rest, which is probably going to be, 3 days, and then hit, the dynamic effort. And then accessories, just from that standpoint, the accessories are maybe 20 minutes after you do those first couple exercises, but they almost become null because what exactly are those accessories going to do that those other two lifts didn't already do? So the accessories are where you're going to have to really watch and see how you recover, because you can put some in from the beginning, and if you don't recover, then pull them out and see how things go and just go that route. That I would recommend that before what you're talking about doing.
Okay, Dave, how can I achieve the bounce at the bottom of the squat?
That's just practice. I don't know if it's really necessary, but so I don't know why the question's being asked. But you have to have the confidence to let it go. So as you squat down, you just gotta, start with a broomstick or a dowel rod, and just work on letting that movement do it. And then from there, it's what's creating your inability to be able to do that is muscle inhibition. So you need to find a way to work around that muscle inhibition to be able to let that bounce or stretch reflex, which is what I think you're talking about, to occur. And your body is going to inherently not want to do that. So you're going to have to teach it to want to do that. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by repetition. So, start with the lighter weights. And then obviously as you work the weights up, that inhibition is going to start to come back, so it's going to be practice, it's going to take time.
All right. On the reverse hyper, would you suggest using heavier weight and less reps, or less weight and more reps for optimal carryover to the power lifts?
Both. Personally, I think the reverse hyper, and it needs to kind of be defined too, that the reverse hyper is Louis' machine. It's not an exercise, so the machine is patented and trademarked and so forth. So, if you're talking about doing anything else, it's a bilateral leg lift, but for all intensive purposes here, the reverse hyper is something that I think needs to be done multiple times per week. Yes, I do fall in that bias where at the minimum, there should be a heavy day and then a light day. And then on the heavy day, I like to see more momentum. So the swing arm on the heavy day, you want, if you're on the machine and you're looking down at the legs of the machine, the swing arm on a heavy day, you want to begin to reverse the weight when the axis of the swing arm, or where you load the plates, just passes the structure or the feet that are closest to your face. So the old school reverse hypers are going to have 4 legs. The newer ones have 1 post, and then it fans out. So on the newer ones, you're going to reverse it when that axis, the swing arm, gets really close to where that post is on the floor. That's what you're going to see when you look down when you're on the machine. That's how you're going to do the heavy ones. So you don't want to allow full momentum to where all you're doing is just swinging. You're going to reverse the swing before it reverses you, but just short of that. So it's going to be pretty damn close to before it reverses you. And then you want to load that. You want to load it up and hit it for sets of 6 to 8. And that might be 3 or 4 sets. It's all based upon, your strengths. And on this one, you want to flex your ass as hard as you can when you get to the top, and that's the key thing. Now you can drop your head and pull your head back up to be able to, get that firing pattern a little bit more efficient. That's more personal preference in my opinion, but keeping the spine in the same position is kind of what I'm more here for, but if it's the heavier one, then there's probably going to be more movement in the upper body than if it's the lighter version, which I'm going to talk about next. On the lighter version, you're going to use much lighter weight, probably half the weight, if not more, than what you would use on the heavy version. And on this one, you're going to come up on the machine a little bit higher, or if you have one of the tilt machines, you're going to tilt the machine so it's tilted, I guess an incline if you're facing towards it. And on this one, a decline if you're facing towards it. Either way, let's just assume it's a neutral position. Keep it that way. So you're not adjusting so you don't have the ability to adjust the table, which I think is going to be what most people have. On this one, you want to use a slower motion and reverse the swing arm before you see the plates begin to pass the post that's in the middle of the machine. So it's going to be very strict and very tight. And then on this one, you're going to want to keep your elbows on the bench and basically arch your lower back. It's not really arching, but you're going to be, because of where your elbow position is and the way that your spine is, still going to be a neutral spine position, but it's easier for me just to tell you to be in an arch position, and you're not going to be able to be in an arch position if you do what I'm saying. So it will be a neutral spine. It's just a cueing type of thing. And then you're still going to flex your ass, but you're going to feel most of the work being done with the low back. So alternating, and this one's going to be higher reps, which sucks. If you're a bigger dude, this sucks. It doesn't matter. If you're a bigger person, this sucks because you can't fucking breathe, and you're going to be doing between 12, 15. If you can get to 20, then do 20, but that's really freaking hard to do because the breathing is just a pain in the ass. So you'll have a heavy and a light day. It doesn't matter if it's max effort or dynamic effort on how you rotate that. If you're just doing one of each per week, it doesn't make any difference. So if you want to do it more, if you want to do it on lower body, and if you want to do it 4 days a week, so on the lower body and upper body days, then the lower body days, I would make those the heavy version, and then on the upper body days, I would make that the light version. I also put them in for the lifters that I help that are in this gym as part of every warm-up that they do. So it's not heavy. It's just part of the warm-up routine that they do. And a lot of times I'll have it just be a bent knee version to where they won't have the ankle and the straps and the swing arm isn't moving at all. It's just a bent knee bilateral leg lift or a bent knee reverse hyper, and working on flexing the ass and activating the lower back.
Okay. I have an issue with falling forward in the squat coming out of the hole. What would you advise for correcting this? Currently including a lot of high bar squats to try to increase quad strength.
Okay. Google search, and I'm going to give you a better answer too. But Google search elitefts.com. I always screw this up, and I can't believe that 2 dots, which is a colon, right? Or it's not a semicolon. The 2 freaking dots.
I would say so.
All right, I don't. If Lily was here right now, she'd be tearing me a new asshole because I fuck this up every single time. But the 2 fucking dots. So elitefts.com, 2 dots, and then type in falling forward on the squat or squat falling forward.
If they just Google Elite FTS falling forward on the squat, it'll come up.
It may, but sometimes that when you put the colon in there or semicolon, I'm an idiot. So when you put that in there, that basically tells Google just to search our site. So your site searches, it's way better than actually using our site search, which sucks unless you're looking for a product, which we will address and fix. This in 2020, we're pushing every day to be able to try to get the responsive site or the mobile site, the new site launched, which you're not going to notice that much of a difference. You will if you're on a mobile device, but it's very, very close. But once we get that up, rolling, debugged, then we're going to start dialing in a lot of the things that didn't get dialed in when we migrated over to the site in 2014. So use the Google thing for now. If you're searching anything on the site, we got 1 million pages of content, guys. So that helps to kind of filter it down. But that's going to pull up an article that is going to give you a lot of different solutions for this. What I see now is I see a weakness in the upper back is most of the time that I see this. So it's not the lower back. It's not a lack of being able to hold a brace. It's not, from what I'm seeing, it's not that. It's the upper back isn't able to maintain position when coming out of the bottom of the squat. So you have to build up the upper back strength. So how do you do that? As I said a little bit earlier, there's 2 ways that I would address it. I would address it heavy with, yoke bar squats, close stance squats, which is going to try to pitch you forward a little bit more, as well as more static work for the upper back, which could be, say, a face pull where all you're doing is holding that position in the back, or, using bands, attach them to a power rack or anything that's not going to move, and then pull your hands back into the same position that you would have your hands when you were squatting. And then from that position with, a band in each hand, then, flex your lats, get your shoulder blades gap, get everything the way that it's tight as it should be, and hold it for a 10, 15 count, and do that for 3 or 4 sets. This could be finisher stuff that you do at the end of every training session to be able to strengthen the ability to keep that tight over a period of time. So it can be that it's muscularly not strong enough to be able to handle, the load when you're coming out of the bottom, or it could be that you're just not strong enough to be able to keep it tight for a long enough period of time. So it's best to address both and that's the case with pretty much any weak point.
Okay. How would you structure high rep work cycles such as 6x6, 8x8, 10x10 in replace of dynamic effort? I saw an article on Elite FTS about this. Just wanted your take on this. I'm not a competitive powerlifter. Thank you.
I would do it as a 3-week. I like 3-week waves. I like to base everything, not everything, but I like to base the dynamic work on 3-week waves. The max effort work is going to change every week. That's kind of how I've always been. But the dynamic work is going to be in a 3-week wave. So I'd wave it over a 3-week period of time. Now, how you want to be able to do the more high volume type of work, it's completely up to you. This becomes more the art of a training program where maybe you do, 6 sets on week 1, 8 sets on week 2, and 10 sets on week 3, and you use the same load, 50% or, 55%. I have in the conjugate podcast that I did, there was 2 of them that weren't that long ago. I speak about how to determine the optimal percentage for yourself. So I don't want to go back over that again. So that's in those podcasts that you can go back and listen to. But that's one way to go about doing it. You can stay 10, say it's 10x10. You can hold that for the 3 weeks and then just drive the percentage up a little bit. So you can wave it that way. So there's a lot of room because it's high volume. So there's the percentage is going to be a little bit lower, or the weight lower, the intensity lower, load lower, whatever you want to call it, is going to be lower. So there's a little bit higher room for error that gives you more room to play around with what you like and what you are going to look forward to doing. Me personally, I would hate doing 10x10 every week for 3 weeks. I'd rather ramp it up, in using the same weight than I would doing the same volume and changing the intensity, but that's personal preference. There is going to be a different impact based upon total workload, but when you're talking about this high of volume, the workload's going to be pretty much high no matter what. So I don't want to say the workload becomes, I'll say it becomes less significant than if it's going to be at a heavier percentage. Then the workload becomes a lot more significant. So that's how I'd go about implementing it in there.
Okay. How should an absolute beginner with no ailments and pains warm up for the squat, bench, and deadlifts? Sample routine, ? Not a competitive powerlifter. Limited equipment, just has a rack, barbell plates, and bands.
I still default back to the best warm up you can do is the exercise that you're going to be doing. So depending upon, if it's freezing cold outside, you probably want to do more stuff to kind of get your body temperature up a little bit. But if not, then just spend more time doing a dowel rod first, maybe, and then the bar, or just go straight to the bar. And don't leave the bar until you feel like the bar feels right, if that makes sense. So let's say, I'll use myself as an example. My shoulder is fucked. So if I bench, then I'll use a shoulder saver pad, which is essentially like a 1.5 board. So if I'm going to bench, then it's going to be the pad and the bar. And I can guarantee the first set's going to feel like hell. And that makes no difference if I do face pulls and this big elaborate warm-up protocol. Makes no difference. First set's still going to feel like a nightmare. So I may only do 1 or 2 reps because I'm not going to do a lot of repetitions. That basically everything I do is in pain. So let's get that out there away. But there's training in pain, and there's training in too much pain. So there's a difference between the two. You're not in any pain. So you don't want to train in any pain outside of just the muscles burning from training the muscle. So your normal training stimulus type of pain. The longer you do that, shit like that begins to change a little bit. So if it's only 1 or 2 reps, then fine, I do 2 reps, rack it. Then the next time I do it, I might be able to get 4 or 5, then I rack it. The next time I might be able to get 6 or 7, then I rack it. If I can get 10, then it's okay, I rack it. But then at that point, I'm still not ready to go up because I want to go back down because most of my sets are probably going to be in the 3 to 5 range, and do another set of 3 and make sure that that's all cool. Do another set of 5. Then I'll go to 95 pounds or a quarter on each side and do the same thing. So if it's 2 reps and it's like, shit, there it is again, I'll do 2 and rack it. I'm not going to push towards the 3 if it hurts too bad. I'm going to stay with it until I can do 5 to where it just is like normal, and then kind of move up from there. So there might be a bazillion sets that are done before I have a plate on each side, but that's irrelevant because I want to make sure that the muscles that I'm using to do that exercise are completely warmed up and ready to do the exercise for when the movement begins to become harder. Now, looking outside of that and say just normal warm-up stuff, it's the warm-ups are a big thing now, so it comes and goes. It was a big thing 15 years ago too, then it went away. Everything goes in phases. Right now the warm-up is a big damn deal. Give it 5 years and everybody's going to be saying you shouldn't warm up at all. You should just do just the weight, just the exercise, screw the warm-up, because all you're doing is fatiguing the muscles before you train them. Watch, you're going to see it happens. Everything goes in cycles. So the way that I kind of base it is if I come into the gym and my upper back is too tight, you want to be tight to a certain degree. And you'll know as you progress training, I guess it would be training as you become stronger and as you keep doing this, you're gonna know that certain muscles are gonna pretty much feel a little tight all the time. Not tight as in bad, just tight is what it is. So if I come in and the upper back is too tight, then I'm going to I'll foam roll until I get it to just be tight. So where I need it to be able to train. And that's the same with the lower back, where generally I'll not recommend anybody roll their lower back pretty much ever. But if your lower back is jacked tight when you come in because you were sitting all day or driving, then take a few passes on it to get it just tight. You don't want to get it completely loose because that would be a big mistake because you need it to be able to stabilize the lifts when you're doing them. But if it's too tight and you don't do anything to address that, that's also a big mistake. So you got to be able to find what your level of normality is for when you train and when you feel best when you train, and then do whatever you need to do to be able to get to that level of normality. So everybody's going to be a little different. So do different things. It could be a small circuit of face pulls, shoulder work. I don't think it matters that much, to be honest with you, as long as you get the body temperature up, and sometimes you'll need, activation or of certain muscles if they're not responding the way that you want them to respond, but you're not even to that point yet. So it becomes a mood point. So this would be to the lifters that are a little bit more advanced. But still, even if you don't do those and they're activating on the main lift, you're going to get them warmed up by activating them on the main lift, which is what you're trying to warm up in the first place. So that's my advice there. Just kind of see what makes you feel good, and then keep doing that, and then change it when it doesn't make you feel good anymore.
Okay. Do you have any regrets in regards to the amount of time, energy, and focus you've spent over the years lifting? Lost time with family, friends, etc.?
Since I retired it was probably a little bit after that. Yeah, I have one regret, and I've always been honest and transparent about that. The way I treated my wife and family when I was still competing was I regret that. It wasn't, like slapping them around and shit like that. It was just cognitively not being there, not really giving a shit, about what their needs were, or not really their needs, but, all I cared about was training, and it was just powerlifting was first. So if there was any activity or anything like that that was going to get in the way, then I didn't want to do it, and I wouldn't do it. And it didn't matter what was said or done. It didn't make any difference. It's fucking up my training. I'm not going to do it. And because of that, over a period of time, it created, a divide, between us that later on, had to be fixed, and I had to become aware of how much damage, I guess you would say, that it actually created. And then when I became aware of it, that's when I regretted it, because that wasn't what I thought I was doing, but it was, so that is something that I think I could have done better, and then would have had more support. And then with more support, I think I could have been better. So it's kind of I regret it for numerous reasons. I regret it because it's not the way that I should have treated my wife. It's just, it's not fair to her. It's not fair to the support that she gave. It was wrong, so that's why you regret it, from that standpoint. But at the same time, there's the personal side, the ego side, the selfish side of me that regrets it, because how much better could I have been had I had full support, instead of, fighting about training. And it wasn't always that way. She was very supportive for a lot of years, many, many years. But, over a period of time, it's like, I think they begin thinking, when's this shit going to be over? You've been doing it for 20 years. You got other things that need to be more important. Your business needs to be more important. Your kids need to be more important. Your spouse needs to be more important, but they're not, they're not even on your radar. And, so that's the only regret that I have. So that's it, nothing else. Fine with all that.
On a different note here, how to increase the range of motion of my hips for back squats, my low back rounds at end range, but I can do full ATG, Olympic front squats. It feels like a mechanical block, not stretch muscle at the end range.
Maybe you shouldn't use that stance. That would be the first thing. Maybe it's not how you're built to be able to squat. So, why beat a dead horse? Because if that's not how you're built, and it's mechanically feels like it's getting jammed up, then why create the excess wear and tear on a structure that isn't designed to be able to work like that? The one way around it is to gain 70 pounds. That makes everything bigger. Then you'll be able to, have more weight on the joints, which is one con, but be able to have better leverages, which is a plus. So If you do want to still try to increase that range of motion, then it would be the same advice that I gave a little bit earlier for a different issue, and that would be start on a high box. Make sure you know how to box squat, sit, pause, flex, come off of the box so you're not slamming on the box. And then over a period, and you may have to be on a 30-inch box. I don't know how high, maybe even higher, on a box that you can sit comfortably in that stance and not have any problems. And then you don't need to use a shit ton of weight, but still train, so you can use 40, 50% or whatever. I don't know how you train. So use the higher box for whatever reps you're doing. And then if it begins to feel more warmed up and a little bit looser, then you can take an inch out and then do a few sets a little bit lower. Sometimes people can get all the way down to parallel in one session based upon the information that you provided. I highly doubt that's going to happen for you. You may have to do one training session at that super high box, and then the next one you might be able to do a couple sets at that high box and then go down 1 inch and then finish the rest of your sets on that lower box and kind of keep repeating that process until you get down to the box to where you want to be. And then when you get down to the box to where you want to be, do say 80% of your sets and then kick the box out and see if you can maintain that same form and technique that you had on the box without the box. If you can't, then slide the box back in and keep using that, but start pulling the box out more frequently so you can mirror the technique that you're using on the box with the free squat.
Can you explain the strategy of bulking until total stalls to find the best weight class? You touched upon it on the podcast with Joe and Janice.
It's a leverage thing. So it's just how I was always taught. A lot of people are taught differently, but for the majority of people, this seems to be the best strategy. And it's just keep putting on weight. As long as the lifts are going up, you just keep putting on weight. I'm not telling you to put on, 150 pounds in 1 year. But if you're starting off in, 181 weight class and, maybe 3 years from now, you're going to end up being 250, or competing in the 242s or competing in the 275s. Somewhere along the line, you're going to begin to find the leverages that best suit your structure. Nobody can sit there and say with 100% certainty, this is what you need to weigh. But you can get pretty close by looking at the top lifters in your weight class, say the top 30, top 40 lifters, and what is their body weight to height ratio. And then when you look at that, you can begin to see, okay, this is probably what I should weigh, and then kind of go off of that as a little bit of a guide, but it's still going to be how the weight feels to you and how the leverages feel to you. But once you get to that top weight, and that would be at a point in time to where it's really, really hard to get your total to go up. So because the gains are going to come really easy as long as you keep gaining weight. Because the bigger you get, the stronger you get. It happens that way. It's just how it works. So the gains are a little bit easier as you're gaining weight. So that's another reason for this. When you get to a point where those gains just are not coming the same and it's kind of stalling out, that's probably when it's time to, that weight class, you either stay there or you drop down. What I typically like to have people do is to drop down. So train up to a weight class, basically as high as they can get to where they're still making really good progress. And then once that really begins to stall, you're going to start competing in the weight class under that, which then they're going to have to learn how to be a little bit more on point nutritionally and, have to really focus more on the training process and the recovery process and the nutrition process. That things become a little bit tighter as far as room for error when you have to compete in that, what I would call an optimal weight class. When you're competing in those, for lack of a better word, non-optimal weight classes and you're working your way up, you can get by with screwing up a lot of things and still make progress. But once that starts coming down, It's no longer the case.
Okay. What do you think about J.M. Blakely's 36 rep method for squat and deadlift, and how did he run it for deads?
I don't think he ran it for deads because he had serious back issues, which is why he was a bench press specialist. So I don't think he ran it for squats either because his back is bad. It was really, really bad back then. So it wasn't really used for that, but it would be used the same way regardless. So what do I think of it? It works really well for a lot of people. It's not his method. It's a method that's been used for decades. So it's another method of training. It's progressive overload. It's the key thing if somebody's going to use that style of training is it's going to become very hard at a certain time to be able to make the progress that you're going to make in the very beginning, which is why if you listen close, I think it was in the first podcast, JM talked about drilling holes and record breaker plates, which are 1 1/4 pound plates, that he had holes drilled in them so he could still go a little bit heavier every time he made that jump, but it was basically micro plates, jumps to be able to keep that progress moving forward, because when that jump each time is 5 pounds, the 5 pounds can get really heavy, so the micro loading is probably the biggest takeaway from that most people overlook.
Okay. Will there be any problem if I only do front squat and ditch the back squat, as back squats cause knee problems? I messed up my left knee in a non-related lifting injury.
Why? I mean, no. The answer is no. But don't do anything that's going to put you in acute pain. Or chronic pain. Just don't do it. There's other exercises that can be done and other ways of training that can be done that you don't have to do when you're in chronic pain, especially if you're a non-competitor, or even if you are a competitor and you're 6 weeks out for a meet. There's always other things that you can do. If you are a competitor, there's a time period where you're just going to have to fucking nut it up and deal with it, but that's not all the time. That's a very small period of time that would fall right in front of a meet where you really don't have any other choice except pull out of the meet. So front squat, back squat, fucking no squat, goblet squat. There's always different things that you can try to do.
Belt squat.
Yeah, belt squat. You don't want to do anything that's going to make a situation worse.
Okay. What do you think about rounding the upper back in the deadlift? Is it unsafe? Because I feel pretty strong that way.
I would need to see the person. I would need to see the deadlift. And basically, I need to know what their structure is and what it looks like. It can be really, really bad. But at the same time, there's certain people that, spinal structure is suited, that's the optimal way to pull. It's not many, because again, go back, same advice that I've been giving throughout this whole thing. Go back and look at the top lifters in your weight class or the top lifters across the board and see how many are doing it. All right. It's very few, but there are some. Okay. So there's always an outlier, and I could always be speaking to one. So from that standpoint, it's not really a matter of the position. It's a matter of the tightness and how the spine is being stabilized. And I can't see that through, a question being posed in text, but if you send me a video of you pulling, DM it to me on Instagram, I'll be able to let you know.
Okay. What's the difference between the Romanian deadlift and the stiff leg deadlift, and how to perform each one with the proper technique? What muscles should fire, and which one do you recommend for building hamstrings?
That depends upon who you're asking. Everybody's got a little bit different opinion on what a Romanian deadlift is. So it's the execution of two different types of deadlift is what I'll tell you. So a stiff leg deadlift is essentially that, so the knees are going to be a little soft, so they're not going to be completely straight, so it's not going to be a 100% straight leg, but it's going to be just barely bending the knee. So there's going to be a lot of stress on the hamstrings and the lower back when you pull, because the stiff leg deadlift, you're not going to really, you will in a way engage the glutes, but you're not intentionally trying to engage the glutes. You're just basically trying to do, a stiff leg pull using the hamstrings and the lower back. So that would be that. The RDL is more, in my opinion, more about getting all the weight going back onto your hamstrings. So think of if you're doing a hamstring stretch, put one leg out in front of you, and then you bend over, arch your back, and bend over to try to stretch your hamstring out. So it's the same thing, except your feet are going to be together. So you're going to, arch your back to a degree. It's, again, same thing as with the reverse hyper. It's a neutral back position, but think about, arching the back and pushing your ass back, because what you want to do as you're lowering the bar, and the bar is going to stay against your quads the entire time. Don't let the bar drift out off of your quads at any time. So as you're pushing back and that bar stays against your quads, it's like you're just stretching the shit out of the hamstrings, like you're trying to tear them as you go down. So you're pushing back hard, onto the heels and back into the hamstrings. And then when you begin to feel like your back is going to not break, but when you feel like your back is going to round, where you can't hold neutral anymore, where for you to go any lower, you would have to round your back, then you're going to come up. So for some people, it might be middle of the quad because the flexibility isn't that good. Other people, it might be the knee. Some people can get down to, mid shin. That will change sometimes it will change over the set. It will change, over the reps. It's because as you do it, you're going to stretch out, you're going to warm up more. But you want to come back before that happens. So you don't want to let that part happen and then come back up. So it's more just working the crap out of the hamstrings, and then at the top, flexing your ass to be able to get it to come forward. So think of one of them working, from the back of the knees to the top of your ass, and the other one working, from pretty much like the middle of the hamstring up through the erectors.
Okay. What's the proper head position in the deadlift, sumo and conventional? Head up and sometimes overextend like Ripito recommends, or neutral spine and head in line with the spine, double chin?
I like to see the head in line with the spine, but I do like to see, the chin being pulled back, because the body is going to inherently follow the head no matter what you're doing. So, this old story, but where this really began to ring true for me is I used to do hack squats as an accessory exercise eons ago, and I always kept my head down. And one day, one of the guys I was training with told me to keep my head back, so not up, but bring it back. And he told me the body's going to follow the head. And I ended up, I was able to add like 200 pounds to the stupid machine and do the same number of repetitions. And that was like, oh my God, I get that. I finally understand it now. And it took a stupid hack squat for me to be able to actually understand what this whole head back thing was all about, because you always think, when you're coming up through the sport, you always think it means looking up in the air. And I knew that was not I always knew that was stupid, that wasn't what you should do. I like the neutral head. So and that's because I have a bias towards that, and everybody's got their own bias, right? So I have a bias towards that because that's where I know how to coach from. So when I know that's in position, I know what to look at next. Then I know what to look at next. I know what to look at next. But the spinal position is pretty much what everybody's concerned with, is the spinal position, and then how close the hips can be to the bar to be able to create the best lever or the best leverage that you can create for the person that you're working with. So the higher those hips can be, the shorter the lever is going to be. But if they go too high, then you end up basically doing a stiff leg deadlift and not being able to, activate the glutes. So you got to be able to find that position to where everything kind of works like a door hinge. That's how I see a conventional deadlift that's, really solid technique. It looks like a door hinge where, a sumo is going to look kind of like a leg press. So whatever needs to be done to be able to get that position optimal. And for me, I teach from the feet up, but the head plays a major role from that, because the head's going to play the bigger role in the squat coming out of the bottom, and on the deadlift, the starting of the actual pull.
Dave, when will Dan Green come again for a table talk?
I don't know. Usually if he comes, it's during the Arnold Classic. So I don't know.
Okay. Following heavy sets on the main lifts, are lower weight sets of the same exercise a good accessory, quote unquote, movement, or would the energy be better spent on a completely different exercise?
I don't like doing back down sets, and the reason for it's really, really stupid, but it's just something that I saw Franco Columbu write years ago, man, probably when I was just starting out, that your body remembers the last set, which is probably complete bullshit, but it always kind of, he sold me on. I mean, he's a lot bigger and a lot more jacked and a lot stronger than I ever was. So especially at that time, I'm like, oh God, that makes total sense. My body's going to remember the last set. So I better be a good one, and it better be fucking heavy. So I've always kind of stuck by that, which is
to this day.
So, if there's try to put some logic to that, if you're going to do back down sets after working up to something that's really heavy, more than likely those back down sets are going to be done in a fatigue state, which means that the technique probably is going to be less than optimal, which could lead to reinforcing poor technique. So there is some logic that I can apply to that. I'd rather just move on to whatever the supplemental exercise is.
Okay. Advice for someone who wants to lift or who wants to use bands and chains for the first time on the big lift.
Start with
squat, bench, and deadlift, I assume they mean.
There's so many variables that I don't really know where to begin, because I mean they both have their purpose, and they both serve very well.
They probably want to watch a video on how to set it up, is what I would think.
And we have those on the site. So again, semicolon or colon, whatever it is, bands and chains, and it will show that.
We've got other YouTube videos as well on that. They work differently, the bands and the chains, as far as what they're doing in the body, where the chains are kind of, to make it very simple, the chains are deloading into the floor, the bands are deloading into you. So it's very simple for me to sit here and say, beginners should probably just use chains and not use the bands, because the bands are a lot of eccentric tension and strength and so forth. But at the same time, if I'm working with somebody that's a 100% total beginner and they don't know how to get tight and they don't know how to apply force, I can put a very light band on a dowel rod and have them sit down in a squat. And if they try to stand up slow, they're going to find out real quick they're not going to get up. So they might realize after the first rep, I need to come up a little bit faster because the band tension is on there. The other thing that the bands provide when they take the bar out of the rack, and it's just the bands, they're true beginner again, is they're going to flex everything. They're going to get tight. So I don't have to spend all this time, hitting them with a stick or doing whatever I'm doing to try to teach them how to get everything tight. If I can just throw a little bit of band on there, and it makes their natural instinct is to get tight, because they don't want to get thrown all over the place by the band. So it can help reinforce two of the hardest things that there are to teach in the main lifts, and that is getting tight and applying force to the bar, which the chains don't do that. So they take the chains out, it's just, kind of like dead weight, and then it deloads on the bottom.
Now, if you do come up slow, you need to apply force, but it doesn't come on the same way that the bands come on, no matter how much the chains are. So they're different. So when I utilize them in programming, I mix it up. So it's probably 50-50 band and chain, the way that I put it in there right now. And I'm going to work it a little bit more towards bands for some of the lifters I'm working with now, to be able to see what kind of response I'm going to get from that, because we haven't really pushed the bands that hard as I normally would want to, and it's because I haven't had to. So it's kind of like an ace in the hole that, you know, there's certain things that I kind of keep, and I want to hold. I got a lot of tools in the toolbox, put it that way. So there's some tools I don't want to pull out until I absolutely need, because I know they're going to work. So I want to hold out and just use the tools that I need to build what I'm building until it gets to a point where it's getting a little bit harder to build. It's getting to, a level that it's a little bit higher, that's going to need different tools and different mindsets and so forth to be able to progress forward. But how you attach them is critical. That matters. So hanging a chain straight from a bar to a floor is stupid, because each link, I think, weighs like a pound or 3/4 of a pound. So if you watch the people that have the chains hanging directly on a squat, directly from the bar to the floor, you might see 4 chains actually deload throughout the whole range of motion, which means that they're creating a deficit between the top and the bottom of 8 freaking pounds, which is why bother? All right. If you're going to hang the chains straight from the bar, then make sure the chains never touch the floor. At least you're going to get a stability aspect where the chains are going to be trying to throw the bar all over the place, to where you're going to have to stay tighter to be able to control that. So you want to set the chains up so you have whatever load that you want to have at the top. And then when you're on the bottom, the chains are completely unloaded on the floor. And then they pick up when they come back up again. So it may, depending upon somebody's bench stroke, squat stroke, or whatever you're doing, it may end up being a hell of a lot of chain, because most of it's going to stay on the floor the whole entire time, just by the nature of the stroke and their style and the setup. So be it. Then that's what it's going to be. At least you're going to have, a deficit that's greater than friggin' 8 pounds from top to the bottom. It's 30%, 40%. I mean, it depends what you're doing. If it's speed work or max effort work, there can be all kinds of different deficits that you want to work from. The bands, on the other hand, you want to make sure that there's always tension at the bottom. So if you're typically used to using 200 pounds in the bench press, but you want to start using bands, then you hook the bands up. And if it's just, taking a mini band, putting it under a dumbbell, and then slipping it over the bar so it's folded in half, roughly it's going to give you about 80, maybe 90 pounds at the top and say 40 pounds at the bottom. The easiest way to measure band tension is to get a deer scale, like a hunter would use to weigh a deer. You can get them on Amazon for like 20 some bucks. You can't get any more accurate and easy than that. It's way better than the methods that I used to use to try to figure out band tension and all that other shit. But anyhow, the point is, when you have that tension at the bottom, then you want to take that amount of weight off of the bar. So if it's 40 pounds at the bottom, and it's the 200-pound example that I'm using, you want to use 160 pounds, because it's still going to be 200 pounds at the bottom, because there's 40 pounds of tension at the bottom. Then you're going to have the overload at the top. So that's the key thing, is make sure the bands always have tension, make sure the chains, are actually having some type of variance.
Okay. What is your favorite Christmas movie?
Charlie Brown Christmas, man. I don't know. I guess it's the only thing that's popping in my head.
Not Christmas Vacation, huh?
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Not too late. Locked in.
Yeah, I know. It's locked in.
All right. How would you recommend incorporating board press into training? As a secondary movement, can you change the number of boards per week or per 3 to 4 week wave?
Yeah, you can do it as a secondary move. I do it all the time to help with lockout strength. I like to change it. It depends how I'm going to cycle that supplemental exercise. See, you got to keep things in context. If you want to keep the same supplemental exercise in there, say for 3 training sessions, then maybe you're going to do a few sets of 5 at 80%, and then go 85% the next week, then 90%, kind of progress it, into triples. And then you would stay on the same board. If you just want to stay, say, around an 80% range for heavy 5s, then you might be able to repeat the same board and the same movement for 2 weeks, and they'll make progress. So then they do it the first week, then the next week you just tell them, hey, look, go 5 pounds heavier than you did last week. Typically that's going to work really well for 2 weeks. The third week, though, it's going to get pretty gray. Then I'd rather have them change the board instead of getting 3 reps when they really think they should have got 5, because this is a mental game too. So you want to reinforce, you want to have a lot of success, throughout the training program. So a lot of wins throughout the training program. So they're ready when they come time for competition or to max. So I don't like missed reps. I don't like sets that aren't for the number of reps that they're prescribed for, because those are their losses. It's technically probably no, from a training standpoint, it's probably not going to matter, but you're also dealing with people, so when they're going to have, at least the ones I work with, usually have higher expectations of themselves than what I have of them. And so mentally that can play a toll if they're always not getting the reps that they're supposed to get, where you're supposed to be, training and building, confidence as well as strength. So look at that first. Like, how do you want to structure the supplemental exercise? Do you want to change it every time? Then you can mix it up however you want. Do you want to use some type of small progressive overload with it? And if so, how long? 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 5 weeks? All this is, subject to personal preference, and it can be subject to, what the athlete likes, what they don't like, or what their weak point is, and the most optimal way to bring up their weak point or bring up your weak point. And you typically know, and you can find all these things out just by talking to them and asking them questions on what works for their training, what doesn't work, and kind of go from there.
Okay. How do you train for an elite total compared to training for a state record?
Fuck the state record. State record don't mean anything. There's a million fucking state records for different. Fuck that. Elite total is something that it's more of a big, broad-based goal. So it depends how far the person is away from that. Anybody that I'm going to personally try to help, I want that to be their goal. If they don't have an elite total, I want that to become the number one objective. If it's going to take 5 or 6 meets to get there, then so be it. Then I'm going to work back over 5 to 6 meets. And that doesn't mean I'm writing out a full training program for 5 to 6 meets or 2.5 to 3 years. It does mean that I do have some kind of basic template on what should occur within each one of those 5 meets as they progress forward. So the first one isn't so much going to even be about how much they can total or what their strength is, but where is their technique? How close to optimal can we get that by the first meet? It's not going to be where I want it. I can guarantee that. But by the second meet, it should be where I want it to be. And then by the third meet, it should be dead on where I want it to be. And then from there, it progresses up. Then from there, it's what class are they at? How do we get that next one? Where do we need to go? And kind of work that way. So I like the long-term perspective, because I think nothing beats that. Because to me, a 12-week training program is a piece of shit. But if you're looking at something that you're trying to develop over, 5 or 6 meets or 2 to 3 years, then you know that commitment's going to be there. Then you can really, really start honing the things that really need to be taken care of on the front end of the training cycle, so you don't have to worry about it at the back end. Because when all the person does are these 12-week cycles over and over and over, and they jump from program to program to program, usually what creeps up to hit them when they start getting sticking points later down the road are all the stupid things that they should have taken care of at the very beginning of the training, the basics. Everybody wants to not do the basics and jump to all the advanced shit, bands, chains, circumax, you name it. Instead of taking care of the basics, of how to build the torso, how to build the torso strength, how to ground, how to become tight, how to have optimal technique, all those type of things. The same basic things that apply with any sport apply to powerlifting. So, and that doesn't just happen in a 3-week training cycle or a 4-week wave or an off season. It takes time, especially if they don't have experience with it. They don't know what they're doing. It could take 1 or 2 meets, and that's not an over exaggeration by any stretch of the imagination. It's for some people, it might take a couple years just to get the basic stuff right. And then from there, the other stuff begins to build upon that.
Okay. Would doing dynamic effort every week and max effort every 2 weeks work for the older lifter? Or would it be better to stick to 2 times dynamic effort and 2 times max effort per week with less volume per session?
If those were my choices, I would go with, the max effort more per week, because it's less volume, it's less wear and tear. Dynamic effort is really, really hard on the tendons, and it can be hard on the joints as well. So, and it's got a lot of volume attached to it. Where a max effort, if depending upon the exercises that you're selecting, they should be the safest exercises that you can do. But if you think of what's really going on there, there's a lot of joint stability. Say at the top of a squat, you got to stabilize. You got to stabilize the joint, more or less is where I'm getting at. And it's the reason I'm pausing is I'm trying to figure out, is this person walking things out, or are they using a monolift? Because that does change the dynamics a little bit. Because when you walk things out, you're going to have the impact of the step of the walkout, which is going to, be a little bit harder on the joints than if you're using a monolift and you don't have to take that step. But you have that stability aspect. And then you also have, the heavier weights, which is going to help to maintain bone density. Which I think is vital. The older that we get is to try to maintain, bone density for forever, is what the actual goal is. And if all you start doing is really, really light training, well, then the bone density over a period of time, it's going to accommodate to whatever the light training is that you're actually doing over a long period of time. So, it's not like you're going to lose the bone density you spent 20 years trying to develop. So, but with that, when you're saying 2 max effort, I'm assuming that you're talking lower body and upper body, and you're not talking 2 lower body sessions, because that would be a stretch. But if it's lower body and upper body, that's the choice I would go with. 2 of those and 1 dynamic, then you can flip the dynamic each week.
Okay. Would you describe Matt Rhodes as more of a dirty animal or a critter?
Matt Rhodes is a dirty animal or a critter.
I think it's from one of his fake accounts.
Oh, man. Probably a dirty animal. I mean, a critter is like a rat and a mouse. A critter to me is like something you can just step on and kill. Matt wouldn't be that easy to just step on and kill, so it would be more of a dirty animal.
Okay. Dave, what do you think are the most important 5 items every lifter should have in their gym bag?
Condoms, because you never know. I'm joking. Belt, wrist straps, that's it. I mean, you can stretch it out from there, but the majority of the time that I competed, I didn't have a gym bag. The only gym bag that I had was the thing that I used to take shit to a meet with, and I just tied my wrist wraps around my belt, and would loop my belt, and either when I was at West, I'd just leave it at the gym, or before then just throw my belt in my car, and that was it. If when I started training for a meet and I had to use gear, then I would just carry in the briefs or the squat suit or the bench shirt, because I didn't use it a lot in training. So I really didn't have a need to carry around a bag from fucking one machine to another machine to another machine to another machine. To me, it just seemed like a really stupid concept, where the only thing that I knew that I would probably need almost every training session was the belt and the wraps, and that was pretty much it. But if you wanted to be prepared for anything, I suppose belt, wrist straps, maybe a pair of straps, knee sleeves, and chalk, assuming that most gyms don't let you use chalk, but that's it. That's kind of it. I don't really have, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with this gym bag thing, even though I own 1,000 fucking bags. I don't have a lot of experience with that, because here it's just, I got shit thrown all over the gym.
Okay. How do you mentally get over getting under the bar with heavy weight? Every time I'm going for a 1 rep max, I get into my head and I revert back to my old faltering technique.
Don't worry about it. You can use visualization, self-talk. It's confidence is what we're talking about here. Whatever you need to do to be able to have confidence, figure out what that is and do it. Some people, it's listening to certain music. Other people, it's self-talk. Other people, it's visualization. Everybody's unique on this. There's no one thing that's going to be able to work optimally for everybody, but you have to be able to have confidence in your ability, and your training should be building that confidence. So if every time you get underneath something heavy, you resort back to things, then I would question what you're doing with your training. Because your training is obviously not building the confidence for you to get under the heavy weight, think that it's all going to be there, because it should. You should be able to get to a heavy weight or a competition, or, if you're taking a weight in the gym or something like that, and be able to absolutely just fade to black and everything just happen automatically, because that's what your training is supposed to develop and supposed to do. So you have to get over worrying about it, because that's not going to do a damn thing for you. Worrying does nothing for anybody. So you got to get over worrying about it and stressing out about it, and look at your training and figure out what you need to do to be able to reinforce the positive attributes that are going to carry over to you being able to do that top lift. And that's really, it's, people have made it so freaking complicated, where it's, at the end of the day, you're lifting a heavy weight, and one of 3 things are going to happen, and 2 are bad. You're either going to make it, you're going to miss it, or you're going to get hurt. Accept those facts and try to mitigate, the missing it and getting hurt to the greatest degree you possibly can, to increase the success of the first thing, making it happen.
Okay. Have you ever been to a Turkish prison, and do you like movies about gladiators?
No, I've never been to a Turkish prison. And I think the only movie I've ever seen about gladiators was Gladiators, and that was a good movie. I tried to watch it a second time and I didn't like it. It got boring for me, but my attention span with movies is not so good. But I liked it the first time, kind of like Braveheart. That was a great movie the first time, but when I tried to watch it again, it's like, I can't watch this.
Yeah. What's the biggest cause of falling backwards when performing the squat?
You're not having your feet grounded or rooted or whatever people want to call it. That's the biggest thing, because that's going to be your base of support. Your base of support's not there, so it's flipping you back. So I when I teach a squat, I teach it from the ground up. We'll be putting out a video sometime before the end of the year, or early January, mid-January, where I'm instructing a few people on how to actually squat. So you're going to hear different cues for different people and so forth, but you'll see that I'm starting from the feet and working up. There's a reason for that.
How do you find your indicator lifts that let you know your comp, bench, squat, and deadlift are going up?
Look back through your training and see what correlates. When I'll sit down with somebody to consult with them, if they're a coach or if it's an athlete, I want to know what they feel has the highest dynamic correspondence, or sorry, what has the best carryover to the lifts or their athletes competing on a field. Because whatever has that best carryover, that's going to be the main things that you want to develop. And then from those main things that you want to develop, once those are established and, they're wrote out on the table or paper or whatever it's going to be, then we can look at those things and say, okay, now what do you think built those? And usually everybody has an answer for those. And then all those become indicators, but that second layer becomes more the key indicators, because you can attack those from multiple angles and multiple ways to be able to get them to have an impact on that main thing.
Okay. I'm in my first powerlifting meet this weekend. Any advice? Also, do you have any thoughts on using a mouthpiece? Thanks for all your wisdom.
I like the mouthpiece. I learned the hard way after breaking several teeth. So the mouthpiece is a good thing. It will save you on dental bills way down the line. So nothing wrong with that, as long as you can breathe. I had one custom made from my dentist. I believe my insurance covered the first one, and then from there I'd have to pay. But I've had the same one. I have a backup that I bought many years ago, but I've had the same one for 15 years. So yes, it was maybe the first one, like I said, my insurance covered that, so it was nothing. But I think the private pay for it when I got the second one was $400. But let's just say I had to pay $400 for the first one, and I've had it for it might be 20 years now. I've had it for 15 or 20 years. To me, that's a good investment, because I could never breathe right whenever I would use like a football mouthpiece. Now, there's newer ones today that weren't around when I was training. I have no need or desire to be able to try to use them, because what I have is fine and works great. So I can't say if they're good or bad, but if they're not super expensive, definitely invest in it. If it's going to work better than a football mouthpiece, I assume it probably would, because those are the ones that you have a hard time being able to breathe. With your meet, it's your first meet, so have really low expectations. I know that sounds fucked up, but have low expectations. Just go there, have a good time, establish a base. That's all this meet is doing for you. So it's going to establish the baseline. So yes, you go from training like a power lifter to becoming a power lifter. So congratulations on that. But all you want to do is establish a baseline. So once you have, now when you're doing your programming, you're going to know your best squat is X, your best bench is X, your best deadlift is X, because gym lifts don't mean shit. So you're going to have that baseline, and then now working towards that next meet, you have something to try to beat, and that provides that motivation and that drive to be able to train and go into that next meet to be able to break those numbers. And then the meet after that, so on. So just have fun, lower the expectations, and have a good time.
Okay. On the topic of first powerlifting meets, this guy said, just did my first powerlifting meet. How would you change your training post-meet, specifically the week after, knowing you will do another meet in 6 months? And then as far as how the meet went, he said, went really well, learned a few things, got called for soft knees on the opener squat, and got 2 red lights for loss of control at the top of my last squat attempt. Got lots of work to do on bench.
All right. It sounds like you got a lot of work to do on your squat too. Technical work, but that's okay. That's a good thing, because the technical work is easy. That's just repetition, reinforcing good technique, and all the stuff that I've already talked about in this podcast. If I was helping you, based upon what level you're at, if you're beginner, intermediate, and how do you define that? Well, I define that a lot of ways. So it's a combination of training age. It's also a combination of experience and technique. Doing the lifts, is a technique on point, which it sounds like yours still needs a lot of work. So if the technique needs a lot of work, then you're falling more in like a beginner intermediate range, which is going to change how I address the training that's after a meet. The first week after a meet, if it's anybody that I'm working with, I really don't care what they do. Optimally, yeah, they should probably come in and train, try to work some of the shit out. But who cares? It's more important that they just chill, and relax, because they just spent a good portion of their life over the past 6 months, 5 months, or whatever it took to be able to get ready for the meet, going into that meet. So it's a good time for vacations and stuff like that. So whatever they need to do to just change state, to be able to kind of get back to normal and so forth. So the first week, I really don't care. It doesn't matter. After that, they should be back in the gym. And if it's an advanced lifter, then personally, I don't want them to have a bar in their hands or on their back for 8 weeks, 2 months. So there's going to be no spinal compression, from, a barbell on the spine or, or a barbell in the hands on the bench so basically what I'm trying to do is the back just got pummeled training for a meet. It's pretty much nobody's going to escape that. The spine gets somewhat trashed training for a powerlifting meet. So if there's fractures, micro fractures, or whatever it's going to be, you want to give it time to let those heal. So the best way to let those heal is to get all the compression off of it. So the barbell, coming down onto their thoracic cervical spine, when they bench, probably isn't the best thing in the world. And the barbell on the back when they squat probably isn't the best thing in the world. So I want to remove that. And the reason I want to remove it, the more advanced they are, is the load that they lift is a lot higher. Their technique is a lot better, which means that it's creating even more, strain, on the joints than if it was kind of spread out throughout over the whole body. Because if you see somebody that's got really shitty technique, yes, there could be a lot of, joint force on one joint because they're moving all over the place in this funky ass way, but it's not a lot of joint force in specific areas that you're going to see that fall in line with the sport of powerlifting. It's more spread out, it's more spastic, I guess you could say, than very direct. And but and I don't want to see any repetitions under 8. Now, what this forces them to do is that's why I have a lot of machines in the gym. So now they got to use the machines. They got to use dumbbells. They got to use kettlebells. They got to use all these different things, to be able to still train, and actually build muscle by doing a repetition range, which is going to be more conducive to hypertrophy. They're going to be using exercises that they probably haven't used in the past 4 or 5 months, which is going to be more conducive to hypertrophy. So it's basically a hypertrophy block while trying to let and give the spine time to heal. Now, if it's a beginner, that time period can be greatly reduced down to 3 or 4 weeks because the load or the weight isn't as high, and their technique is a little more fucked up. So when their technique's more fucked up, yeah, you can have more, like I said earlier, you're going to have more joint strain in certain areas, but it's all over the place. So it's not as bad, which it sounds opposite of what most people would think, but if you really think about it, you'll see where I'm coming from with this. And the other thing too is the beginner needs to get back into building and reinforcing technique. So I want to get them back as quick as I can, but I still want to make sure that anything that did get injured or, because there's still spinal compression and all that's happening. It's just not as great as what's going to happen with the advanced lifter. And so I still want to give time for that and then build up from there.
Okay. When tapering to heavier loads in a training cycle, how much form creep is acceptable in the squat and deadlift? Is it okay to just grind through some form errors and fix them later?
You're going to have to, because by the time you're at that point in your training program, you're going to have a very, very hard time fixing technical issues when you're 3 weeks out. I'm not going to say it's impossible, because everything's possible. It's very unlikely. So you just need to kind of, ride with the car, ride with what got you there, so build the shit out of whatever that area is and go in with it.
Okay. Is RPE effective as a way of modifying load, not just tracking difficulty for novice lifters?
No. For advanced lifters, intermediate lifters, I think it's everything. I think, the ability to auto-regulate is the difference between being good and great. That kind of rhymes, If you want to be great, you need to auto-regulate. There you go. Jeez.
New shirt idea.
Yeah, another shirt idea. That's stupid, though. I forget what I was talking about. What was the question? I just completely blacked out.
Is RPE effective?
Oh,
as a way
RPE
of
for the
modifying?
beginner. The beginner, it's so tough, because a beginner, here's the thing, and those guys that work with beginners, or the lifters that are beginners, you're gonna get what I'm saying right now. You might do one set, right, and it goes unbelievable, and you have no idea why the hell it felt that good. And then the next one goes back and it feels normal, and then say the next one is, again, it feels unbelievable, and you don't know why. Well, your technique it's slowly fading. It's not fading. It's slowly growing and becoming better. So you're hitting better technique on certain reps than you are other reps, and it's kind of happening by accident, because you're learning a skill, and that's kind of how learning a skill works. So when you hit it, it's going to feel easy, and when you don't, it's going to feel a little bit like a grind. So if you have a set that you don't hit it, and it feels a little bit like a grind, and you use an RPE, it could be an RPE of 8, where the next set could be an RPE of 5, just because the technique's better. So that's where I think a beginner falls a little bit more into just sticking to straight percents, which, again, none of these ways are optimal. Like, percents aren't optimal, RPE's not optimal, none of them are optimal. It's just what's going to work best for the athlete during that given time period of their training state. That's what needs to be figured out. I've just found that the RPE at that time, it's too inconsistent, where a percent becomes a little bit more consistent than what the RPE is. But that switches very quickly. It switches over a period of time.
Okay. What is your best accessory workout for a bigger bench / deadlift?
It
Depends.
yeah, everything's going to be answered with it depends. But to me, when you're talking about, accessory training sessions and extra workouts and all the other stuff, the main goal of those is either recovery or what I would call a feeder training session. So something that's going to help you be ready for the session that's coming up. So it's still feeder or recovery, still recovery. So it's not so much, what's going to be the best thing for it because it's going to build anything. It's what's the best thing to be able to help you be the most prepared for the next training session. And a lot of times that might be not doing that accessory training session and just resting. So that's where it's this gray area of it depends, where if I don't know the full training history and what's going on, then I'm not too sure, what direction to really go with this, because, most people don't need extra sessions, but the ones that do really do. So it's kind of one of those things. So experimenting is always a good thing. So you can always try to, what were the lifts? The deadlift and the bench?
Deadlift and the bench.
Deadlift and the bench. So you can always try for, say if it's a bench press, and I won't give you something easy that you can do from home. You can always try ultra high rep band push downs. I just made an Instagram post about it, which I actually repurposed as a blog post as well. So you can try that, is a session that you do from home. That could be, you can try it the night after you bench, or you could try it the day before you bench. One of them is going to be, more blood to help recovery. The other one's going to be kind of what I would say is a feeder type of workout, but they're both recovery workouts. See if it makes a difference or not. And for the deadlift, banded good morning, kind of the same way. So ultra high reps, kind of positioned the same place during the training plan, but it would be something, to experiment with. And on something like that, you should notice a difference in how you feel training almost immediately. So like within a week. And if it doesn't make a difference in how you feel training, or you feel like your training's down, it's not because you're out of shape, it's just too much. There's other factors that I would say it's because you're out of shape. This isn't one of those, because it's not a workload related stimulus.
Okay. Would you prefer a flat foot on the bench over being on your toes, or vice versa?
I prefer whatever is going to create the tightest position for you to be in. So that's the best way I know how to answer that, because your whole body has to be tight. So there can be no holes, no slack. Everything has to be rock solid. So if somebody was to try to, pull your knees apart or push your knee in or just move anything, they're unable to do that. So whatever creates that degree of tightness to where you feel like you're shoving your shoulder blades and traps into the bench and through the bench, then that's what you need to do.
Okay. How would one program plyometrics? Would it be the same as max effort and dynamic effort method style? And should it be done as the same day as the lower body?
In 95% of all cases, one should not program plyometrics. So let's just keep it at that. So it's probably unnecessary. It's if it was to be done, I would want to know why. I'm a big fan of that. Everything has to have a logical and reasonable explanation of why it's in the training program. So I'd want to know why it's there, and then why it's there above something else that could be there. That's what I'd want to know. Now, especially for a power lifter, if it is to be done, then keeping it on dynamic days would be the best, but that's where I'll put that. And if it's a sports athlete, then it's a different conversation, and that falls more into blocks and training blocks and what's in season, off season, and so forth, because a lot of practices, and a lot of sporting activities are plyometric in nature. It's just kind of like organized plyometrics, organized to do a specific task like run and cut, and so forth. So that's a different, longer conversation. So I don't think that's what I'm being asked, though.
Okay. Do you think there should be a deload when using the conjugate method? And if so, how would you implement it?
It's kind of built into the program. So, with the max effort work, when you begin to feel a little beat down, you're going to do either, concentric only work, or that's when you're going to pull it out and you're going to put in ultra high repetition, or not ultra high rep, but we're going to put in the repetition method to failure, or you could just, take that day off. So that's going to be kind of determined on, how you feel, how things are progressing. The dynamic work works in waves. So, every time you go back to a week one, that's a reduction. So that's a deload. The supplemental exercises are changing, so they can be ramping up, and then the new supplemental exercise is introduced, which brings it back down, and then it ramps up again. So it's kind of built into it. Now, if you're talking about how to taper, before a meet, taking a circumax completely out of the equation, and it's just your normal conjugate stuff. The last squat session that you should do before the meet is going to be, the Friday, not the week of the meet, but the week before. So week one would be the week of the meet. Week two would be, that second week. The last dynamic squat's going to fall like 7 to 9 days, or however it's scheduled, on that day. That should be your week one weight. So if you're using a 3-week wave, that's going to be week one. So you just did week 3, then it goes down to week 1. The max effort work during that week is going to be submaximal. So 60%-ish, somewhere around there. It's still going to be hard. But you're going to stop 1 or 2 jumps away from where you would finish your normal max effort work. And it would be the exercise that you feel the utmost confidence it's pretty much impossible to be able to get hurt doing. And the bench is going to be, wherever that falls, 5-6 days out from the meet. And it's going to be, again, week 1 and probably half your sets, and that would be true for the squat as well. Where what I tell the lifters out here is, do your sets until you start to feel like they're explosive, then stop. So that could be 2 or 3 sets, could be 4 sets, stop. And then that's it. It's not that hard. It's not like this big elaborate, peaking scheme, because the whole system is based upon, waves, so it's inherently already built in to be able to do that.
Okay, I am recovering from jumper's knee, and my knee is almost back to 100%. Now I want to start building a plan to build back my squat from 0. How would you plan on doing, or how would you plan for this? Any tips?
Box squats. And it's, let me step that back. I'm not a doctor or physical therapist. I always got to put that out there. So whoever's been helping you with your rehab, you want to run the question by them, because you're going to be dealing with a post-rehab environment. So I don't know exactly what's going on with the knee. You need to speak to the person that knows exactly what's going on with the knee and be able to create stimulus that's going to be able to move you forward in an upward progression without having stimulus that's going to be like taking a sledgehammer to a nail. So figure that out first. In most cases, I've had the best success with using a box squat and sitting back, keeping the stress off the knee as much as I can, and then kind of working from there.
How would you alter bench press technique for permanent anterior deltoid pain?
I wouldn't bench. I would take time off of the bench until the pain subsides or becomes less chronic, and then come back to it. It's simple. Find other things to do that don't hurt, and until that heals, and then work whatever's creating the issue. If it was a pull or some kind of acute strain, then it's just going to take time and blood to be able to help it heal. If it's something that's being created because of poor technique, then you're going to have to fix the technique with really light weight that stays kind of out of that pain range, or maybe the weight might hurt for the first 2 or 3 repetitions, and then as the repetition goes on, the pain goes away. Then that would be an exercise that would be good to kind of reinforce and build it. But to keep, pounding against it when it's fucked up it's not going to help it get better. Not by any means. It's going to take longer for it to heal.
Was it the lifters' fault or the federation's as to why Multiply died? And if the lifters could come back with perfect lifts, would it even matter enough to gain respect, again, now that Raw has taken over?
I wouldn't say that it's dead. I mean, to me, dead would be 0 lifters. And there's still, if you look at, the sport's grown. So let's keep that factor in mind. The sport's probably triple the size that it was 15 years ago. So the sport has grown where, and I'm just going to throw numbers out there as an example. Say at its height, there might have been 3,000 or 4,000 multiply lifters, but that was out of, say, 15,000. Now there might be 900, 600 to 900 or something like that. So it's a third, of what it used to be, or 25% of what it used to be. But the sport's also maybe 80,000 lifters. So it's dropped significantly in the percentage of people that are doing it. So that's just the statistical part of the whole thing. So it's not completely dead. Is it going to come back? I don't know. That's not for me to decide. That's for the lifters to decide. As far as what was the other part of? There was a word, not reputation, but
Let me see. I'm pulling it up right now. I'll just reread it. Was it the lifters' fault or the federation's as to why Multiply died? And if the lifters could come back with the perfect lifts, would it even matter enough to gain respect again?
Oh, okay.
Now that Raw has taken over.
all right. I wouldn't say being around the sport as long as I have, I wouldn't say that Multiply's ever had a lot of respect. It's just the fact of being Multiply. You know, a lot of times I'm asked, you know, what's the biggest change about powerlifting and what's the most frustrating thing about powerlifting to me? And it's not, you know, all the things that everybody else complains about. The thing that's most frustrating to me is the sport used to be just single ply and multiply, and that was it. And most of the single ply competed, you know, drug tested, and most of the multiply was not drug tested. So I mean, the line was kind of divided amongst gear, but it was also divided amongst drug testing. So it was kind of a pretty clear line of those two things. So when you went to look at all-time world records, you know, then the track record, there were only two. You know, that was it. There were two. There was the multiply, then there was the single ply. Those were the all-time world. There were two all-time world records per, you know, weight class. And as far as all-time world records, the history for the all-time world records is probably longer with multiply than any other style of lifting that there is. So a lot like Raw really only started to come into play around 2010, 2012. There were some Raw divisions, but it wasn't a whole lot of lifters. You know, so when they went to start, you know, they had to try to find, you know, Raw records that were done before gear existed. But a lot of those Raw records that they were throwing out and planting as being Raw records were actually records of people lifting in single ply gear. So it wasn't a singlet that they were wearing. It was shitty single ply gear, but it was still not totally Raw. And so the history of Raw records kind of only started really 2010, 2012. People are going to debate beyond that. I get that, because they're going to go back to those, you know, old time records. But even if you go back to those old time records, the 40 years in between those, there weren't people breaking Raw records because nobody was doing it. It was just single ply and multiply, and that was it. Now what we have is single ply, multiply, bare knees, sleeves, and then wraps. So now you got 5 all-time world records, which I think we should kind of get rid of the word all-time, because it's not really all-time if there's 5. You know, so it's that's what's frustrating is, you know, is that part of it. So and I'm not in a position to make any decisions on any of this stuff. I'm just kind of pointing out how I feel. I mean, it's like if you're gonna bring in, just get rid of some. Like if you're gonna bring in 3 other divisions, then maybe get rid of the single ply and multiply, which, you know, that's how I lifted and that's what I respect. But you kind of see my point, you know, is if you're gonna just start throwing shit on top, then how many other divisions are we gonna have that are gonna pop up over the next 10 years? Another 3? To where all of a sudden the main divisions end up doing exactly the same thing that all the subdivisions have done, to where we have 8,000 different, actually there's more than that. I think there's 275,000, because we figured the numbers out one time, possible world records that could be had, looking at men's, women, and all the different divisions. It might even been more than that. It might have been 500,000, that was a stupid number. But anyhow, it's kind of the direction that it's going. So fading back to when it was single ply and multiply still had that rap, you know, that it wasn't as good, or the judging wasn't as good, and so forth. And it's just the way it's always been, and it's not going to change. You know, I can look at raw squats that are high as fuck that have all-time world records, and then I can look at the all-time world record that person beat, and that was high as fuck. Then I can look at the all-time world record that person beat, and it was also high as fuck. So there's squats that are high in every division, you know, and I can make an argument that it's harder to squat lower and multiply because you got the gear stopping you, where it shouldn't really be a problem if all you're wearing is knee sleeves, but it still happens because it's just part of the sport. So a lot of the narrative and a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the debates, the Monday morning quarterback, so to say, you know, of powerlifting, it's the same stuff that it always was. There's always been high squats that shouldn't have passed. Always. It's always been that way. It's never going to change. That's part of the sport, and it's a part of the sport that makes people talk about it. So while you can say it's a bad thing, at least it's given something, at least it gives people something to talk about, because in this dumbass sport, people never talk about the lifts that are done clean ever. You know, so somebody can do a great clean all-time world record and you'll hear very little chatter about it. Now, if it's a little bit high in some people's eyes, it's going to be all over the frickin' place. So that's just the nature of the sport. That's how the sport is. It's how it's always been. That's never going to change. You know, the geared lifters now, if single ply and multiply, you know, are going to catch and have less respect. And it depends who you ask. You know, if you ask another geared lifter, single ply or multiply, if multiply has, you know, if there's respect for their divisions, they're going to say yes. You know, now you ask them if there's respect for the raw divisions, they're, you know, they may say yes, they may say no. But typically, if you ask a raw lifter, you know, if there's respect for any geared division, they're going to tell you no. You know, so, and that's always been the same as well, except it used to be single ply versus multiply and all this other kind of stuff. So I don't know if any of it's necessarily, a bad thing, because it's kind of always been that way and it's always going to be that way. It's just people need to acknowledge that's what it is and it's part of the sport. And no matter what they do, it's never going to change. You can put judges in there, or you could put video cameras in there. I mean, this is certainly something that's able to be done. You can put video cameras in there and have computer judging without any shadow of a doubt. That's going to be able to determine, you know, if a squat is good or bad, or if a lift is good or bad. We have the technology to be able to do something like that. It's just the federations that have the money to be able to implement stuff like that won't put the money to implement stuff like that. And that's maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. You know, I don't know. But if they did that, then people are going to bitch about the computer being wrong or the algorithm being wrong to figure it out. So when it's human error, it's human error. You know, it's kind of what it is. So I don't know if I really answered the question or not, but I think all lifting, by when you move up the food chain, if you want to call it that, when you move up the rankings and you start speaking to the lifters that are ranked in the higher divisions or in the top 30, most of them are going to have respect for all lifters regardless of the division. If they're tested, not tested, geared or not geared. 20% are going to be jealous assholes that are going to create, you know, issues, because that's just their personality. It's how they are. The beginners don't know enough to even have any opinion one way or another. So it's all the people in between that create the most drama. And they're not, I mean, this is what I tell other people. They're not going to be in the sport for longer than a couple of years anyhow. So does their opinion really fucking matter? You know, so as a lifter, you can't let any of this crap get to you, because your objective is just the next meet. So you hit the next meet, knock that out, move yourself up in the rankings, go to the next meet. All the chatter doesn't mean a damn thing. It doesn't matter. It means nothing. What matters is what you do on the platform, and that's it. You know, that's what matters. You can only control what you can control. The things that you can't control, you need to forget about and just focus on the lifting and move forward from there, regardless of whatever style you want to lift in. You should have the right to be able to lift however the fuck you want to be able to lift, especially today. So it shouldn't matter what other people think and what their opinions and so forth are. It should be whatever you want to do in the sport to be able to do what you think is going to bring out the best in you or the best challenge for you to be able to become better and then move from there. You know, it's the biggest respect anybody should ever look for in the sport isn't the respect from the judges or the peers or the coaches or any of that kind of stuff. It's self-respect. So find that, and then everything else falls into place. If you don't have that, it's always going to be a mess.
Great. That seems like a good one to end on there. What do you think, Dave?
Yep.
Okay, thanks for tuning in, guys. And if we didn't get to your question, ask it again, or we may just randomly answer it on the next one.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks,
you.
guys.